lawyers for former President Donald Trump in his bank fraud trial are actually making the argument that, oh, if Donald Trump says something, you probably shouldn't listen to it. Oh, interesting. So now they made this argument during Tuesday's cross-examination of a witness for New York Attorney General Letitia James. So according to the Daily Beast, while questioning the Attorney General's witnesses, Doug Larson, Trump's lawyer, made the argument that Trump's valuations, they weren't really real. They were just kind of made up in his opinion, man. And therefore, no one should really take them seriously. If Donald Trump says something, if he throws out a number, you just should ignore it. Just don't listen to it. It's fine. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, okay. And by the way, how this matters in a legal context is that they're arguing that since it was his opinion of the valuations of his properties, that means he couldn't have possibly done fraud because it was just his opinion, man. Oh, interesting. So now Larson, who has years of experience assessing the value of Trump Organization buildings while he was working at Cushman and Wakefield, was cross-examined by Trump's defense attorney, Lazaro P. Fields, who, again, was putting this tactic on display. Fields had asked Larson, quote, "You agree that appraisals are an art, not a science?" Larson responded by saying, "I've heard that term before, yes," later acknowledging that two appraisers in the courtroom could come to two different conclusions. Yes, that is true. For example, you could have one appraiser come, staying in a house, for example, right? So one appraiser could come in and say, well, I think your house is worth $150,000. Another appraiser could come in and say, I think your house is worth $170,000. I mean, there's a difference there, but when we're talking about Trump properties, remember his own valuations were tens of millions of dollars higher than the actual appraisals. So there's kind of a big difference here, and there's some other things that are very relevant as well. Now, the whole idea, though, is that the appraisals, again, this is the Trump's defense, which are commissioned by Capital One Bank, should just be taken as Capital One Bank's opinion, the appraisal. And so what we have here is not an official appraisal of the property from a real appraiser, and then Trump's, false valuations, but just two people with different opinions. And, those opinions put by Trump just happen to be used as a basis for loans and things, They're not lies, they're just opinions. Wow, it's really stretching it. So now, since that was apparently their opinion, they argued that Trump was free to make his own independent assessments of his properties and their valuations, and then, of course, send them to Mazars USA in order for them to make a picture or portrait of his wealth. So now, of course, the issue that Letitia James' suit brings up is that it's not really an accurate picture because of all the fraud. I mean, basically, it's Barnau Jesus of financial portraits. That's the closest comparison that I can come with, okay? Not exactly accurate at all, really. And not worth nearly as much as they would believe. Now, in fact, state investigators used that testimony from Larson to show that after he had conducted an appraisal, Trump's staff would go in and change the numbers. They would fudge the numbers on their own internal spreadsheets and on his personal financial statements, which would again be sent to Mazars, and then he would use those fudged numbers as a basis to try to get loans. So, and other things. So it's not really just about his opinion on the worth of the property. In one example, Assistant Attorney General Mark Ladoff pointed out how Trump seemed to double count the same commercial space at the Manhattan neo-Gothic skyscraper 40 Wall Street, telling up the expected income from the Dean and DeLuca grocery store, but then registering that same area as rentable space that could bring him even more cash. Now, it can't be both at the same time. One or the other. So Ladoff asked, quote, "Is this double counting the Dean and DeLuca lease?" To which Larson paused and then frowned. "I'm not sure what they did," he said. "I know in my June 2015 appraisal, Dean and DeLuca was included in the valuation. So it was double counted, but he didn't know it, didn't realize it. Now, he also, Trump, blatantly lied about the size of the New York City penthouse on paper, claiming it was actually 3 times the size of what it actually is. And of course, if it's 3 times the size, well, then he's going to ask for like 3 times the money. Well, all right then. How do you explain that one then, with it being his opinion? His opinion can't be that it's, well, it's my opinion that it's 3 times the size that it actually is. Okay, but that's not based on any sort of factual information at all. You can't just have an opinion on how big something is. You know, as far as like when you actually have square footage involved, when you actually have measurements, that opinion's not going to cut it. You have to have the actual measurements for this. You know, look, they say it's 600 feet, but I actually think it's 1,600 feet. That's my opinion, you know? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge you for 1,600 feet instead of 600. Wait a minute, that's not right. Look, so now, during a break in the trial, Trump Organization Chief Legal Officer Alan Garten made an interesting argument here to the Daily Beast. And he basically said that he thinks that no assessment of Trump buildings could possibly be grounded in anything concrete. Oh, interesting. Because there's nothing like them. What? Quote, these are unicorn properties. Unicorns! He pointed to Trump Tower, saying, at 57th and 5th, you're at the crossroads of the shopping capital of the world. What could you possibly compare that to? Wait, but that doesn't mean that you can make up the size of a property or double count something in order to get a better valuation. That has nothing to do with, oh, there's nothing like this in the world. No, you can't do that. Now, the Daily Beast explains that their tactic centers on the idea that prices are just completely relative. Made up! And look, I can see it to some extent that, yes, I mean, our entire economy seems to be made up too. Money's made up. So they're just taking that to the logical extreme of, hey, look, if money's made up, if our economy's made up, then I'm just going to make up the value of, my properties. I'm just going to make it up myself. But wait a minute, we have appraisers for that will actually look at legitimate things, real things, like the condition of the buildings, the maintenance of the buildings, how new they are, things like that, what they're used for, where they are. So there are actual real guidelines they make these appraisal assessments on. Whereas I don't think Trump's looking at that at all. Trump's just like, I think it should be worth more and more. I think it's worth $11 billion. No, that's not a real number. It's fake. It's made up. It's fake. You can't do that. Look, that said, I understand wanting things to be appraised higher than what they're appraised at and having the valuation because maybe you put a little bit of work into it and that appraiser didn't count it. I know that appraisers can lowball you from time to time. I know that's a possibility. And maybe in some of these instances, maybe he was lowballed a little. Okay, I'm open to understanding that, to accepting that possibility. Okay, and I understand that it happens. That said, what he's valued places, for example, like Mar-a-Lago at, way more than what it's actually worth. Way more. And not only that, it doesn't explain the double counting. It doesn't explain lying about, the size of these properties. It doesn't explain any of that. Okay. So now, Justice Arthur Engoron was pretty skeptical of this argument, understandably so, saying that the Attorney General does indeed have the power to punish people for blatantly lying about the value of their properties in order to get financial perks that they shouldn't be privy to. And we have a word for that. It's called fraud. And it turns out this is a fraud trial. So she's completely in her rights to bring this lawsuit against the Trump Organization and against Trump. But again, the whole argument seems to boil down to this. you suckers shouldn't have taken us at our word. I mean, we think it's worth a ton more. You shouldn't have trusted us, though. You know, because of course we're going to try to con you out of as much money as possible. I mean, it's your fault for believing anything that we say, especially Trump, especially when it comes to money, because you know he's a con man. But he didn't do anything wrong, though, by the way. Look, I can't disagree with the idea that you shouldn't believe Donald Trump. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. He is a con man. He has a long documented history of running scams. But at the same time, look, you do fraud. You defraud investors, you defraud the government. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get caught. And at this point, he has. And so, you know, F around and find out.